Well, welcome back to Behind the Shield. I'm your host today, Jason Shropshire, COO at InfusionPoints. And today I've got a great friend of InfusionPoints and me personally with us today, Matt Bruggeman, who leads federal go-to-market efforts at A-LIGN, one of the top FedRAMP 3 PAOs. And he has spent the last several years deeply embedded in FedRAMP, CMMC, NIST 800-171, and GovRAMP. He's also the host of A-LIGN's Mostly Compliant podcast, where he regularly breaks down complex topics with a mix of realism and humor. So please welcome Matt Bruggeman. Hey, man. How you
Hello,
doing?
everybody. Hello, Jason. I'm doing pretty well. I'm on the tail end, I hope, of some viral thing. But other than that, everything's going very well. How have you been?
Awesome. Well, you sound and look good.
That's most
I know
important.
I'm getting, yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, just give us a little bit of background. I love starting by hearing people's history in the compliance space and sort of how they got into it. Give us a little bit of your background and how you got into the space and go from there.
Sure. It is an interesting one, too. So buckle up. So I got my degree in electrical and computer engineering from the Ohio State University. If I don't say the, somebody else will. And then I was working as an electrical failure analyst at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, actually in Dayton, Ohio, for a few years. So I was using that degree. And then I quit and haven't used it since. So when I initially left my job as an electrical failure analyst, which was actually a really cool gig, we basically did mishap failure analysis. So if there was a mishap and they thought that there was anything electrically that may have caused it, we would potentially go on site or, otherwise gather like the wiring, black box information, all that sort of stuff. And we would investigate to see if we could find the root cause and write reports on what may have happened. But
Interesting.
it was right around that. Yeah, it was right around that time that I started to explore the comedy side, which you mentioned, where I started learning and performing improv comedy. And I actually left my job as an electrical engineer to do improv comedy full time. And I was doing improv for business training is the only way that pays any sort of money. So basically that would be, us going into, sales settings, corporate meetings, whatever, and basically doing improv exercises with the groups, because one of the things that I learned and that I loved about improv comedy is, and for those that aren't familiar, it's like, whose line is it anyways? But it's like you go up on stage with nothing, you get some sort of suggestion, and then you make everything up on the spot and you try to make people laugh with it. And so in order to get really good at that, you have to get really good at listening, being present, getting out of your own head, following the fear, all of these fun sort of mantras that you might hear, don't think twice, with improv, that I think are really applicable to life in general, and a lot of like sales skills as well. So we would go in to like sales groups or just companies, and we would do improv exercises with them. First of all, get them uncomfortable, get them on their feet, doing improv
Yeah.
exercises, but then working on some of these skills like communication skills, how to be a better listener, more active listener, how to be present and drop, hey, what am I going to, like, as you're talking, I'm formulating what I'm going to respond. Hey, let's not do that. Let's just
Right.
fully listen, be present with you. And then I'm going to respond organically based on, what you end up telling me. So there's all these sorts of aspects, working together, teamwork, all these things that are really valuable. So I did that for a few years, where I would just go into companies and I would do these improv exercises. And then after a few years of that, I did remember that I do enjoy money, after all, because that didn't pay. That doesn't pay the most money in the world. So, I was kind of like really open at that point. I was like, I don't know what I want my career to be. I'm not sure where I want to go. But I knew I had the technical background, electrical engineer. I was always really good at math and picking up on and learning things pretty quickly. And then the communication skills. So I started to get into like sales engineer positions. So I
Okay.
had a few different jobs as a sales engineer,
Like for tech
before.
companies or
Not actually. The first one was for a compressed air company. So it
oh.
was, yeah, it was a lot of like on the road cold calling, cold sales, like
Mm-hmm.
going to manufacturing plants and looking at what sort of design they had around their air compressor or compressed air system, what they might
Still
need.
kind of engineering related. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So it was a lot of helping them design, especially more efficient, more efficient methods of distributing the air needs that they had with like variable speed drive air compressors and all these fun things. So yeah, I would go in and then help kind of design, hey, here's a better way to go about it. Here's our sort of proposed system. And then the next job, actually, I found, because that was like literally in a car driving out to these plants, a lot of like hitting the road. I was not loving that. So I wanted to find something a little bit more remote. I found another job that was product design and engineering firm. So it was really interesting, actually. So we would, basically our services were product design and engineering. If you have like an idea for something, so like Jason, tonight you have an idea come to you for a new, better toothbrush or whatever. And then you're like, but I'm not an engineer. How do I make a prototype of that? Like, you would call us, and then we would work with you to be like, work with your idea, do some initial design, maybe make a prototype so that you could test it, all that fun stuff. So that was an interesting gig as well. Did that for a few years, and then moved out here to Denver during that time. And so that's when I actually found the opening at A-LIGN. I had no cyber experience before that. But again, I was eager to kind of jump into something a little more technical that I could kind of really feel like I could take on and try to like, know really well. And so when I got brought on, I was on the sales side, I was selling strictly our federal services. So primarily, especially back then, that was FedRAMP. CMMC wasn't really even a thing yet, right?
Right.
So really just kind of trial by fire and training under other folks and working with, our assessment team. We had some really great folks on the assessment side who were really willing to, help me learn a lot, like with them and through them, and ask them a lot of questions. And so for like 6 to 12 months, I was pretty much just soaking it in and learning. And then I was on a handful of sales calls every day where it was like I had to help guide other people. And so you learn a lot through that, I think, right? Through learning how many different people are at what stages in the journey and what they're looking for and what are they missing. And you start to learn like where the missing pieces are for a lot of people. And then you need to go learn it or know it so that you can explain it to them. And so that ended up being a really effective method for me, so that years later now, I'm in more of a subject matter expert role where I help kind of bridge the gap between our service delivery team and our sales team in terms of communicating, like, how do these assessments actually operate? So I know that was a very long answer, but that's kind of how I got into the space.
No, I loved it because there's so many parallels, like just between yours and my experience. I started out with an engineering degree, mechanical engineering. Actually worked for a machine design firm for 5 years, directly out of college, that I had done some internship with before. And, that was going to be my career, but cyber was emerging, in the early aughts, into really a thing. Right. And even a lot of the folks it was either computer science, or there was no MIS back then. So a lot of folks that had engineering backgrounds in the 90s and even prior ended up in these roles that now there are CIS majors for, MIS majors for, and things like that. So it's interesting how many engineers that I come across that are now like doing compliance or doing cloud or have sort of migrated into those professions. But Gary Damer, our CEO, he's the same way. He has I think he has a MS in systems engineering from Virginia Tech, and then he went to UNC Charlotte and for his bachelor's in electrical engineering. Mine was mechanical engineering. So, but yeah, it's really.
I think there's a lot of parallels. Like for me, even though I don't use it at all, I'm so grateful that I studied and got my degree in that, because I think it taught logic-based thinking and reasoning really well, especially electrical engineering, because like you're just learning how a computer thinks, ones and zeros, yeses and nos, and like how do you combine those into different logic systems, and critical thinking skills. I think, right, it teaches you these really core concepts that for me have been super applicable even beyond that, and especially in cyber. So that doesn't surprise me, I guess.
And it's interesting, like you were talking about your first job doing failure modes analysis. I mean, that has parallels to me with audit work, and even forensics to some level.
Yeah.
It's interesting parallels there. And then, I mean, we like to, we follow this idea of systems engineering, right? And to me, like the having that engineering background where you fundamentally think through, how do components have to work together to solve a problem, right? That's really what we're doing in the cyber side, in the cyberspace, and what we do here at InfusionPoints. So engineering has so many different layers that apply, whether it's on the audit side or the build side. But yeah, that's really cool. I love finding out more about people's backgrounds through this process.
I know you're making me want to ask more on my podcast because I don't really dive into it too much, but that would be good to learn more about that. And so for any kids listening, I guess go get your degree in engineering and then never use it is the
absolutely. Yeah, you could end up in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Well, so you talked about, how you kind of got turned on to FedRAMP early on. What was your experience there? Like what surprised you kind of the most about it in your early dealings with customers and what they were struggling with? I mean, what did you learn there?
Yeah. I guess first and foremost, just how crucial that agency sponsorship and partnership was. I mean, that's something you learn very early on. Yeah, I mean, it still kind of surprises me to this day, but I'm not complaining because it keeps me in a very stable job. But just the level of ignorance might sound like a derogatory word, but just by the literal definition, just ignorance around the FedRAMP process. It did surprise me how consistently I came across that in calls that I came on. And what's interesting is, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear your perspective, Jason. I feel like now the ratio of calls that I have where I'm talking with clients and they or someone on their staff is like, oh yeah, I've been at XYZ company. I took them through FedRAMP, so I'm kind of familiar with it, is so much higher than like
absolutely.
5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, it would be rare to come across that. And now it's relatively common. So I think in the early days, it was definitely a surprise of like, oh, wow, I'm shocked how few people know anything about what is required to go through this. What, even something as relatively basic as like the difference between a readiness assessment and a full security assessment and like a ready status versus authorized, like those sorts of things were just like really not understood by people. And so, I mean, again, it created a wealth of opportunity to just be that shepherd and be that guide to be like, hey, here's some of the basics, but we can even go deeper. Based on what you're telling me, I think, we should go here first and then try that. But yeah, I mean, that was the biggest thing I think early on.
I remember, back to 2012 when FedRAMP was started, we were doing a FISMA private cloud for Dell at the time. And that project became one of the first JAB authorized IaaS services out there, right? So we were there from the beginning, and like the first 4 years was all about those first 30 or so authorizations getting through, and the IaaS providers kind of getting their accreditations. The whole idea of PASS was just being figured out and understood, right? Mm-hmm. And then that would become the foundation for the SaaS explosion that came like in 2016 and 17.
Yep.
When things got so much more busy. But yeah, I mean, I remember back in that time, like the average technologist that I came across didn't even know what FedRAMP was. Like they hadn't heard of it. And today it's totally different. And we go into a conversation, a lot of times they have somebody already staffed there or a program manager that's done FedRAMP somewhere else. So, I mean, we have the exact same experience there.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. And now, I mean, it's not that people know the entire process every time, but yeah, there's much more, and there's a lot more folks that, if nothing else, they come to it and they say, oh yeah, I've heard this costs a lot of money, costs over $1 million. It's going to take a long time, and I need a sponsor. they know some of the high level basics at least.
And we still come across those companies that come across that federal opportunity, or they hear about it, or they otherwise think that their solution's applicable to the federal space. But they have that struggle of understanding that you got to be selling to get the sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be ready to a level where it's believable that you could
Yeah.
get there, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very tight contention between those two things. And I tell folks yeah, I get that you can't invest to get all the way prepared. Like nobody can do that before they start selling, right? But these things have to be a stair step. You
Yeah.
gotta your level of prep has to be right behind um, your sales mouth and the money you're putting behind that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, always, excuse me, chicken or the egg. That's what, again, I learned very early on that was very surprising, but that's where it gets nuanced with every client. To your point, you try to talk them through and figure out based on their situation, based on their sales conversations, based on, I mean, it's a whole different conversation if they've been on-prem for years and their client's just like, hey, let's just move to the cloud. That's usually a
Yep.
much lighter conversation than, hey, we never sold to the federal market. I'd love to break into it, So I want to get FedRAMP. It's like, okay, cool. We need to talk through this. This is going to be a journey.
Well, I've even had the issue there where they're used to selling to federal, right? But it's a on-prem SKU, or it's easy to host, where it starts to eat into their ability to sell the cloud version. I've got a customer like that went through jab authorization. They have their jab ATO, jab moderate, and then when they got rid of the jab path, they had to have 5 agencies that to show demand. Well, they had really got their cloud authorized so that they could continue to sell their premise based solution, because a lot of the contracts were blending in that cloud requirement, right?
I see.
But it's been very difficult for them to be able to show that they have that demand, to stay in the marketplace. I mean, fortunately, that's not as much of an issue with this PMO now, but they sort of got over that hump.
That's what I was going to say. There's so much we could get into. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but boy, the times are changing. So everything we're saying is already feeling antiquated.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get there.
I'm sure.
So you talked about moving towards CMMC, right? What was that like? Because that's such a different customer subset.
Yeah. Good question. I think that is the biggest reason. You hit on it right there. The
Yeah.
industries that are affected are just so different. And I don't know that I was fully prepared for that initially until I, again, had a lot of conversations where I was like, oh, okay, like this is a whole different sort of process for them. The way they operate is different. A lot of times there's not any base level of maturity or thought around cyber practices at all.
Right.
Versus if you're talking with somebody about FedRAMP, they're at least familiar with, if not compliant to SOC, ISO, high trust, whatever. With CMMC,
Yeah, I mean,
it was fascinating.
when you're dealing with the manufacturers, especially, they've especially the ones that grew by acquisition, it just runs the gamut. I mean, a lot of the manufacturing orgs that we've done CMMC work with, they've got antiquated machines on the floor that are on the network, running
Yep.
Windows CE or I mean, it's kind of a nightmare.
It's kind of the good and the bad, kind of the intent of the program is like, hey, a lot of these things it seems like you've been doing, you probably shouldn't have been doing, but then that's hard. That's hard to change, especially, a lot of these manufacturing plants, especially in equipment, big, large custom pieces of equipment. Those aren't easy to just go buy a new one,
No.
But in general, it was fascinating. I was excited by the sort of not necessarily shift, still in the FedRAMP world, but sort of focus on CMMC that wasn't there for a while as the rulemaking process was going through, and all the requirements were getting finalized, and all of the nuance around that. So it was definitely exciting to sort of, I don't know, sort of lead the charge on what is this going to look like? What do we need to offer to our clients and when? And a lot of that was just based on, again, conversations that I'm having. Like, I'm so grateful that, I don't know, not a lot of people would say I love being on a bunch of sales calls all day, especially if they're not like the sales rep. Like, I'm not the sales rep, but like, you learn so much just by being on those sales calls and just hearing from so many different data points of clients And to your point, in this case, a completely different industry. And I had to learn so much about what are they ignorant to about this process? What are their preconceived notions that are maybe misconceptions that we need to make sure that we're addressing? And obviously there was a lot of that in the industry in general with CMMC. You know, I made an episode of my podcast that was very, very special, very specialty episode. It was more like a late night talk show thing around what is CMMC. And I likened it to, it had been the boy who cried wolf. So I think people were tired of hearing of it, right? Because for years it was like, oh,
Absolutely.
CMMC's coming, CMMC's coming.
Yep.
And by the time
we were involved in the DFARS push back in 2017.
Right.
So, you know, we remember it from back then, and then we kept waiting and waiting and waiting.
So by the time it came around, everybody was kind of like, I've heard that before. You know,
right.
So it created a need for an even bigger rush than it would have taken to be like, hey guys, I understand the hesitancy based on the history of this program, but here's why it's really coming this time. So that was interesting too. And that's what kind of actually nudged me into more of the outward facing thought leadership role with the podcast and those sorts of things too, was initially just, hey, we need as an industry to kind of drive market awareness. And so the more people we have shouting from the rooftops and explaining things, the better for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more, you know, that's one thing I've really enjoyed about the past year. For us, a lot of it hinges around the changes in the PMO and the transparency that's being pushed right now. But that's the same reason that we went the media route and building our podcast channel is more people need to be talking about this. Yeah. And we need to be inviting more and more folks into the conversation. Just to drive awareness, but also to drive, you know, transparency that, hey, you shouldn't have to, you know, have an answer knower that knows what these requirements mean. You know, this stuff should be more approachable than that.
Yep. Yeah, it shouldn't be some hidden away thing that's hard to seek and find. And again, that's what I found interesting about FedRAMP at the beginning is it felt like that.
It did feel like that.
Like nobody had the answers and they were searching for them. And so I'm not saying that I had every answer and all the answers, but when they were able to talk to somebody like myself or y'all who did have a lot of these answers for them, I mean, you could just hear and see how valuable that was to them. Like, you know, the best feeling in the world for me is when I get off a call and people are like, I have been, you know, digging into this stuff on my own, reading on the website. I've talked to a few other folks, but that 30 minutes was, you know, I got the gist there better than I had in the last like 3 months or whatever. Like that's always my goal. So, I just love being able to be as helpful as I can. And that's why, you know, when I do have something like, again, not to get ahead, but to like 20X, for instance, it's so rapidly evolving and it's in such a state of there aren't, hey, here's what the 20X requirements are going to be going forward. We don't have that sort of stuff yet. You know, it's so when I get asked those questions now from clients, you know, I tell them everything we do know as of today and kind of generally the direction and all that I'm sure we'll get into. But I tell them like, I don't like being in this position. I like having the requirements. I like knowing what it is, being able to explain that process. So that's something that I definitely enjoy.
Yeah. I'm fine with going straight into 20X actually, because we talk about it a lot and it's on our minds constantly. But yeah, I mean, you know, when I first heard that FedRAMP was changing all these big changes, especially moving away from the NIST controls, I mean, I think that really kind of broke everyone's brains, and still does to some degree because we're all still trying to fit this, you know, puzzle piece into the existing puzzle, you know, of the whole landscape, you know, DFARS and CMMC and FedRAMP equivalency. How are all these things going to pan out? So I think a lot of that's still to be determined.
Definitely. I agree. And that's what, again, I think as far as current sort of misconceptions, going back to that theme around, you know, clients, what do they know or not know? I think especially with 20X, it's a lot of people coming and like, oh, I heard about this 20X thing. You know, what's the difference? Should I get 20X authorized or not? And they just view it as like almost like they would view categorization levels previously. I think they view it as like, there was a low, moderate, high. Now there's a new 20X offering. And I try to explain like, no, this is a complete reimagining, right? It's
Yeah.
flipping everything on its head. Like to your point, we're not looking at NIST controls anymore. We're looking at these things called KSIs. They're still going through the pilot program on what are those actually going to look like? How do you assess against them? How do you automate them? What's the machine readability and how does that, talk to each other? And so I think that that's just the general misconception with 20X right now is I think a lot of people just hear about it and they think of it as like an option that they can go get without understanding just how different it is and how much, to your point, it kind of shook up the entire way FedRAMP had operated before.
Yeah. It's funny, like when you look at the landscape of the players, the people that have been involved in FedRAMP for a long time, companies and individuals, it feels like there's two categories. There's like those who are just sort of like, okay, I'm going to go do something else for a while, right? And then there's the folks who are really leaning into it and loving it. From our standpoint, I mean, we chose from the start to lean in on it and see where it could go, because we were ourselves really on behalf of our customers just frustrated with where the process was. I mean, it felt, and this is something that was regularly said in the office here, that FedRAMP is broken. It shouldn't take 11 months in the finalization queue to finally, get authorized after the agency's already given you their ATO.
Yeah. I mean, they're to your point, in a lot of ways, regardless of what will or would be proposed to come out the other end, a shakeup was needed. And there were a lot of things that needed fixing. And so I would agree. I mean, everybody felt that way, especially those of us really in the industry of just like, it gets frustrating, to your point, especially on behalf of the clients. Like when they have, especially those wait times that the PMO reviews used to take and things like that, it's like, believe me, I am with you. You're more frustrated than me. I get that, because you're more, it is affecting you more, but like, I get it. I would be frustrated if I were you. And so, the time, the cost, obviously, the agency, the chicken or the egg problem, trying to get rid of the chicken or the egg of an agency sponsorship first. These are all really, really, really well-intended goals. And then now it's just, hey, live and full transparency, we're going to try to figure it out together as an ecosystem. And so that's what I try to relate to people, is like, we're still in that figuring it out stage, right? So I'm hopeful as well. And we leaned in early as well. We assessed clients. So for those unfamiliar, they did the 20X low pilot, right? So they went through a pilot program of having a number of OSCs go through, CMMC language, cloud service offerings, go through 20X low in a pilot phase. We were the third-party assessor for several of those. In addition to that, we have our own evidence collection platform called Ascend, our own software. We got it assessed, and it is 20X low authorized. So we have a unique standpoint that we've been on both ends, actually. So we have a product that's 20X low authorized, and we've assessed against 20X low. And then now they're obviously in the 20X moderate pilot phase, and we are assessing clients in that phase as well. So we've leaned in as well, and we're like, hey, we're very hopeful as well. These are fantastic goals to seek, right, in terms of improvements from the previous FedRAMP framework, and they're very open to feedback in terms of what this could end up being by the end of it. So why not lean in and give it a shot?
Yep. And, same with us. I mean, we leaned in early. We took our platform. We've been building platforms for years now, coming from everything that we learned out of advisory, like all the motions that were required to walk customers through. We were like, well, we could build a lot of this stuff into a platform, right? That's ready to go on day one for a customer. So we built the accelerator platform out of that, and then a multi-tenant version called XB40 out of that as well. And then some tools like Command Center that are the interface to those two things. And likewise, it gave us the opportunity to take those through the low pilot and the moderate pilot as well. In fact, we just heard back from the PMO today that they didn't think that they needed to meet with us on our moderate. So hopefully nice. That's coming through here real soon.
That's great.
But yeah, I mean, it's exciting because probably like you guys, like we didn't really have a good opportunity to get an a certification or an authorization before, because we didn't have that agency sponsor. We were always being leveraged, once removed from direct agency work, right? We were a provider for a supplier of an agency,
Yes.
and never directly for the agency.
Yep. Yeah, and we kind of felt the pain of our clients for a lot of years there, right? Of like, oh, we don't have
Yep.
that agency sponsor. Yeah, and if nothing else, one of the biggest improvements for the new PMO and the new wave of this, even though the 20X program is still being finalized, those backlogs of reviews that we were talking about earlier, those went away. So that was an immediate nice sort of reprieval. Not having to tell people, hey, when we're talking about timeline until you're authorized, here's what I would factor in depending on who you work with and what your solution is for how long it takes to get ready and compliant. Here's how long the assessment takes. And then they go, oh, right after that is my timeline, right? Nope. Add a bunch more months for the PMO to review it, right? So now we don't have to add in all of those unnecessary months. So that's always nice.
Yeah, I remember when I saw it was probably almost a year ago, or right at a year ago, this being March of 26. But I remember seeing, because I would open the tab a couple times a week for the marketplace, and it would be the same, in those 3 tiles of recent activity, they would be the same,
Yeah.
every day. And then all of a sudden, oh, all 3 of them are new. And then the next week, oh, all 3 of them are new again. And I'm like, wow,
whoa,
what's going on here?
Yeah.
Things
That's
are happening.
a really good visual way to, communicate what was happening, that's very true. For the longest time, it'd be 3 up there. And then maybe finally 1 bumps into that top 3, but now it's clearing them in there as they're assessed.
Yep. Yeah. But and now, as we speak, I think it's the marketplace is like at close to 500. It's $499, I think.
I was gonna say, I was on this morning. It was $499. Yeah.
Yeah. And Pete, somebody called that out, and Pete chimed in and corrected them that we actually hit 500, but when we did the FSI, or the security inbox test, somebody said that they wanted to be delisted, so they went back down to $499. It's like they threw a party in the office for 500, and then they had to roll it back.
Take all the streamers down. Save them.
Sorry, guys.
Week. Yeah.
We'll party again next week.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, it's like, again, it's rapidly changing so much that it's still taking me some getting used to. Like, I still have it up here seeing separately FedRAMP 20x authorized services, a number of those. Like, it's still, like, you know what I mean? I'm still getting used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we're still in this, I would call it just a bit of a stasis almost, where everyone's sort of waiting on the final rules to come out. I think that they've pushed that back to June.
Yeah.
June, I believe. So I think the whole industry is kind of like, just
I agree.
Couple more months.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people like lining up at the start line, and industries, holding them back with the tape and saying, hang on. We need to figure out what these requirements are going to be.
Right.
So let's hold on. But I mean, even that's not far away. It's a few months away.
Yeah, it's not far away. And I think we know the broad strokes, and I think that the actual publishing of the final versions of the standards will just bring things into a little bit more focus, what the final picture looks like. So we're sort of building to that slightly out of focus picture right now, and that's fine.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. It's more accurate to put it that way than to say, hey, we don't know what the requirements are going to be. To your point, it's like, we're not clueless. There's broad strokes. The direction is there, but what's going to be written in the final consolidated rules there, we'll see.
It's fuzzy math. It's not
fuzzy math.
Not quite,
which I'm used to from engineering. Yeah.
Cool.
I know. I had us incidentally blow past a lot of CMMC because 20X kept coming up. So if there's anything you wanted to circle back there to there, we could. I know you
Yeah, we
also mentioned
did.
equivalency. That's a fun topic. I was a 3PAO and a
Oh,
C3PAO. That's the fun cross of our world. So
yeah, I would love to hear
that's
more of your take on that.
yeah. So I mean, early on, once again CMMC was
Well, do
up
we
and
want to
kicking.
describe what equivalency is real quick, just for the
Yeah,
uninitiated?
yeah. So it goes back to DFAR's language, but then CMMC kind of brings the stick behind it ultimately now that organizations are getting CMMC certified. But the long and short of it is, if you're a supplier of the DoD and you have sensitive information, controlled and classified information, and you are choosing to store, transmit, or process that in a cloud service offering, that cloud service offering needs to be FedRAMP moderate authorized or equivalent. Now that had been the language for a while, and
Really,
I guess
since DFAR 7012, I think,
yeah,
back in 2016.
yeah, and then it was I think 2023 when they came out with the equivalency memo. I'd have to pull it up and see exactly when it
Yeah,
was, but
sounds right.
then they finally came out with a memo because nobody knew what equivalent
What was equivalent? Yeah,
is that a thing? I don't think that's a thing. Yeah, it looks like 2023.
it's definitely not a thing. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah, it wasn't like a determined thing. So it was very up for interpretation. Nobody was really giving that any leeway in terms of, oh yeah, you're equivalent. We'll pass that. So the DoD
And
finally
then
issued a memo.
some of the bigger players like Microsoft were like, yeah, our normal non GCC offering is equivalent, right? Because we build it to the same standards as the audited environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And back then, who were you to argue that that wasn't equivalent?
Well, they're
There was no
Microsoft.
definition. Yeah, exactly. And that. So the DoD finally came out with a memo. Let's see, the title is FedRAMP equivalency for cloud service providers, cloud service offerings. So basically, they came out and said, oh, we understand. Okay, we hear you. We need to define this for you guys. So this memo, is still the de facto thing that's referenced if you're going for equivalency in terms of what is actually needed there. To summarize it, it's not a long memo. It's like three pages. But just to summarize it, basically the long and short of it is you need to be compliant to the FedRAMP moderate controls. You need a FedRAMP 3PAO to come in and assess you and assess your compliance to all those controls. And then you need a body of evidence, which is all of the documentation. There's a whole list on there, but all the documentation around your compliance and your assessment proving your compliance. That body of evidence is what shows that you are meeting that FedRAMP moderate baseline and you are equivalent to FedRAMP moderate. The one big asterisk or nuance that is different than if you're getting FedRAMP authorized. Well, number one, you don't need a federal agency to sponsor you because you're not getting FedRAMP authorized, right? So that's one thing to mention that is still a big misconception. You do not get a FedRAMP marketplace listing from getting FedRAMP equivalent. A FedRAMP equivalent is just a body of evidence that you have accumulated from getting assessed showing that you're meeting these controls. It's not involving the FedRAMP PMO. It's not involving a federal agency, any of that sort of stuff. The other thing is, and it writes in there, basically you need to be FedRAMP perfect. There's no POAMs, no findings, right? Which was different. You don't often see that with FedRAMP packages, right? So
I did a
that's
meme
kind of
about
the
it.
big stickler. Yeah, that's kind of the big thing. So we've been performing those assessments. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when the FedRAMP Perfect thing came out, and I was like, oh, okay. So for years, the PMO would laugh at your package, at your SAR, if there were less than 10 findings, and now we're saying that we want 3POs to issue absolutely perfect SAR, security assessment reports. So,
yep. And so as a 3PAO, we can with these, it's often counterintuitively, it's harder in some ways, right? You think, oh, I don't need an agency sponsor. I'm not involving the federal government. This equivalency thing will be just as easy, if not easier. But in that way, it's kind of harder. And as an assessor, these assessments can drag on a little bit because it's like, oh, there's a finding here. Oh, okay, we want to remediate that. Yeah, we want to remediate that. It'll go in the report as a remediated finding, but so I don't know. That's been interesting, and that's come up a lot as CMMC has continued to ramp up. So has that, because they go hand in hand, because more and more organizations that have CUI and that store it into cloud service offerings are going for their own compliance and certification around CMMC. And as a C3PAO, if we're going in and assessing them, we're saying, whoa, you're sending CUI to that cloud provider. I don't see them on the FedRAMP marketplace. Are they FedRAMP equivalent? And so then that's driving them to go to these cloud service offerings and say, hey, you need this FedRAMP thing. They said equivalent is an option. So that's what's kind of driving it. And again, for anybody listening, like, you have the choice. It's authorized or equivalent. But for a lot of people, the authorized isn't an option, right? It's not really a choice. So they go for the equivalency standard.
Yeah, because they can't get a sponsor or, you know, yeah.
They're like, I don't even sell to the federal government. I don't intend to. I just sell to these contractors that sell to the DoD, right?
Yep. And, you know, this is where there is some friction, I think, with 20X and the approach. I mean, what's your take on that? Or if you're 20X certified, let's say by the end of the year, you know, will you be able to support these you know, defense-based customers?
Good question. I'm going to say, take what I say right now with a grain of salt. That I don't think anybody knows for certain. My take, I wish I could say yes. I would love that. Because the other thing about the FedRAMP equivalency memo coming out is I think we were all kind of like, man, that's a really high bar. Couldn't you have chosen a lower bar? Like, that's a higher bar than the organizations that have the CUI have themselves, right? FedRAMP's a beast. So,
I thought it was a missed opportunity not to let those entities also get CMMC level 2. Yeah.
I think they just plainly looked at it as, hey, there's already a standard for cloud service offerings, and that's called FedRAMP. So why don't we just have them do that?
We're just going to defer it to that. Yeah.
I don't know. But so back to your question, does 20X. So the one thing that is stated in the DFARS language and CMMC is FedRAMP moderate, authorized, or equivalent. So we have to look at moderate. So then the question is, does FedRAMP 20X moderate meet FedRAMP equivalent? I would say it does not meet equivalent, because the equivalency memo basically outlines, let's see. So basically, they'd have to rewrite the memo in my eyes, because a lot of what they list is, in order to prove this, you have to have a FedRAMP recognized 3PAO and present the following supporting documentation of the contractor as body of evidence.
The BOE, the body of evidence.
And then all of that body of evidence, 20X doesn't produce those.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's a problem.
I think that would be the problem you run into there. But then the other question is, okay, that's the equivalency side. Does 20X meet the definition of FedRAMP moderate authorized? I would also say no, because they're working through the nuance of this now with distinguishing, you know, at first they were going to break them off. Now they're going to call them all FedRAMP certified. But they're fully transparent that they're going to list 20X authorized products as separate, because it's a separate process. It's a separate level of rigor and controls that you met. Again, to our point earlier, it's a complete reimagining of how secure are you and how are we proving that you're secure. So I don't think that would meet FedRAMP moderate authorized, because they're even denoting FedRAMP moderate 20X authorized as a separate thing that I don't think would meet that.
Right. I mean, there's definitely a lot of open-ended questions, right, about the go forward of the ecosystem. I think, you know, what we've heard very clearly from Pete is he's laser focused on FedCiv, and providing a pathway to get tools into the hands of FedCiv agencies, and federal employees, and you know, that's a noble goal. It's very important, but I think it leaves a lot of, you know, open questions to the other parts of the industry that sort of hinge around FedRAMP, because I think in earlier imaginings of FedRAMP, it was intended to, or not intended, it was seen or interpreted to be a broader solution that other things could stack on top of, right? Where Pete's been pretty clear that that might have not have been the best assumption.
Yeah. To your point, not just around this, but, you know, talked about FedCiv, like that's often something that comes up too in these conversations of clients saying, hey, should I do 20X or not? And I'm like, well, who are you talking to? And often they'll be like, oh, Air Force is talking to us. I'm like, who knows at what point Air Force will even look at or consider 20x, because the focus is on civilian agencies right now. So there's also that nuance of like, well, let's not just say federal government. What agencies
Yeah.
are they in? The DoD? Are they in civilian? Because we've been familiar with that historically because those were different pathways going through DISA versus FedRAMP and all that. But now it's the nuance of, oh, if you're looking at 20x, okay, we have to look at what value that gets you based on who you're trying to sell to still, right?
Yep. And the DoD is a totally separate beast under totally, separate laws
Right.
and regulations. So it's very difficult to draw comparisons, and even the overall size of the DoD. I mean, a lot of customers on the FedCiv side that are more attuned to FedCiv. I don't think that there's the realization that the DoD dwarfs all of that FedCiv spending and opportunity.
Right.
But yeah, it's certainly a niche. And just because you're doing one doesn't mean it translates well to the other. Yeah, that's something we've learned, taking folks through DISA, but you also realize that there's a whole other realm of software providers out there that are doing, direct DoD RMF in a DoD cloud somewhere, in Cloud Army or in Air Force. Space Force is really big. I mean, really all the components are have a very significant presence beyond, DISA is kind of small in comparison.
Yeah. It's very true. Yeah. So, there's all these sorts of layers that, again, that's why it's really important on a case by case basis to sort of dive into like, okay, as a CSP, like what all are you actually trying to do? Right. Is it just pie in the sky? Oh, I'd love to sell to everybody. Or do you have a strategy? And what is that strategy? Is it, hey, I do rely on a lot of DoD contractors. Okay, that FedRAMP moderate authorized or equivalent thing is going to come up. Oh, I want to sell to FedCiv specifically. Okay, cool. Let's talk about what the options are. Maybe look at 20x as an option. Do I only have one opportunity and it's with the Air Force? Okay, we don't even need to talk about 20x, right? So there's a lot of nuance to like your specific situation and your specific strategy.
Yeah, and we've had cloud providers that want to get in the DISA marketplace, but they get sucked into whatever component that they're working with. No, you're going to put that in my cloud over here, and there goes there goes that. But yeah. Well, awesome. Anywhere else you want to take this, or are you ready for some kind of lighter fare?
Well, we can lighter fare it up if there's lighter fare to be had. Yeah.
We do the lightning round kind of thing, where we just do quick answers.
Amazing.
So, yeah. So during your work day, are you more of a kind of a coffee guy or energy drink guy?
I have had coffee a handful of times in my life, and I've had an energy drink maybe a handful plus one of times in my life. So
nice.
I guess neither is the answer.
So you're uncaffeinated.
I'm mostly uncaffeinated. I've been getting into tea a little bit. It's not a lot of caffeine. I'm generally sensitive to caffeine. Like it just takes a little bit for me to go a long way. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I crossed that threshold like years ago.
Which side? You're uncaffeinated?
I'm always caffeinated. So.
Okay. Yeah.
At least during the day.
I kind of envy you. I kind of wish I could. I see people that are like super caffeinated and they're on it, and I was like, I would be shaking in the corner. I'd be like unproductive.
Nice. All right. Out of FedRAMP or CMMC, like which one was your favorite?
My favorite.
What was your fave?
Oh, probably. I'd probably go with CMMC. Just because it was so, I don't know, it was interesting to be there through the whole process, I guess. Like I wasn't around for the beginning of FedRAMP.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but for CMMC, I was around through the whole sort of beginning of it all. And so I think for that reason, it's got a more special place in my heart than maybe I would have for FedRAMP if I was in the industry back then.
Yeah, one thing I wondered earlier when we were talking about your background was, Did you feel like you got connected with more of your engineering roots in CMMC by any chance? Because I know like some of our CMMC customers, they do some cool stuff, engineering related.
Right. There are a lot of engineering firms and things like that, and just the manufacturing floor. There's a lot of engineering going on, but not really.
Oh, that's fine.
Dealing with a lot of them more. Yeah. Dealing with a lot of those companies a little bit more, and I could kind of relate and understand what they were doing. And I talked to like PCB manufacturers sometimes, printed circuit board manufacturers, and I was like, my people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was maybe it was a little bit easier for me to connect with the customers and what they were doing. Yeah.
Well, I remember back during the 7012 push when, DFARS was being enforced in 2017. Like we did a big ad campaign, and we probably talked to more DIB customers than we ever have. And I remember being amazed at just the level of, like, there's a company that just makes foam insulation for some kind of military plane. Like, and that's what they built a business doing that. Anything you can imagine, that a little bolt, or
it is.
There's probably a company that just makes that bolt.
To your point, it opens your eyes up. Like, you're obviously aware of how many companies there are and how many different pieces of things there are that it takes to have all of the stuff that we do and have today. But it really becomes apparent when, to your point, you're talking to like these little niches of niches, and you're like, oh, wow, you've built a very successful business on just that little thing. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a big epiphany for us. Worst acronym in federal cybersecurity. Do you have one like top of mind?
RAR came to mind. Readiness Assessment Report. I don't know why. I think just because it sounds funny, RAR.
RAR.
And
RAR.
also because I've always had a big issue with it, just because it just creates so many misnomers and misconceptions around what it is and what you need to do. And so, like, for us to do a readiness assessment and for you to be ready, I just think that's super unclear to people. They're like, oh, I'm ready. What does ready mean? And so there's a lot of nuance of like, okay, a readiness assessment is an assessment, and we're just assessing your readiness for XYZ, and you get listed as ready, showing that you have some core capabilities. So I don't know. I just don't think it's a great term, and it sounds kind of funny. So we'll go with RAR.
Yeah, it's not a great idea to use like a common term that gets thrown around in general conversation as a structured status.
Yes, exactly.
Like, how do I get ready?
I got to get ready. Like, do you mean like the actual ready status, or you just need to get
the formal
ready for this? Yeah, exactly. Or like readiness assessments, like those are things in the cyberspace independent of this formal readiness assessment for FedRAMP. So yeah, you get it.
Yeah, Pete going to the FedRAMP A, B, C, and D, I think is way heads or tails better than a status like ready.
But, yeah, I agree.
I have one.
What's yours, Caitlin?
Give me
Producer Caitlin has one.
Producer Caitlin is a comedy nerd, so I want to know who your favorite comedian is. With your background, I
know. It's a very good question. You know who I'm going to go with, because the Oscars just happened? I love Conan. Conan O'Brien.
Oh, God. Yes, absolutely.
He's the best. And I think he does such a fantastic job hosting the Oscars. And I love that they let him be him and do like weird sketches that are not necessarily more mainstream on more of a mainstream stage. And I love that he leans into it. So Conan's been around for so long, but he's always been his style of comedy the whole time. I love it.
Absolutely. I got to see him in New York. It was phenomenal. And it feels like he has really good relationships with the other comedians, which I love. Likeable.
Yeah. I couldn't see him like getting into a room with another comedian and like that not ending with like, oh yeah, they're buddies now. Even though his podcast is, the whole premise is Conan needs a friend and he doesn't have friends. So there's some irony there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I love that question. Yeah.
So for the other comedy nerds, you want to plug any of your comedy or websites or anything?
Oh, my personal stuff. Well, I've been working on this animated comedy series for like 8 years because, when it's not a full-time job, it takes 8 years and you only have a little bit of time to put towards it. But it's called Super Dudes with O's, SOOPERDOODS. And we're actually premiering the pilot episode this summer, July 16th. So on YouTube. So if anybody's interested in like adult animated comedy, that is something that me and my team have been working on for a long time that we're very excited. Animation, if you don't know, is super expensive, like insanely expensive. So we ran a crowdfunding campaign a few years ago to raise some money to try to get just a pilot episode animated. And so we did that, and now it's going to premiere this summer in July on YouTube.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. Very excited.
And what about your work podcast?
Mostly Compliant. Got to check that out. So about a year now, I guess I've been doing that one. So I have on different guests in the space. Early on, it was very CMMC focused. But now starting, just because CMMC was like the hot topic, everybody had so many questions about it and so many misconceptions and those sorts of things. And now starting to talk more FedRAMP, especially as 20x is becoming more and more of a thing and people are having more and more questions around that. So check out Mostly Compliant. You can check that out like anywhere you listen to stuff. You can check that out on YouTube as well. And I have, like I said, a specialty episode. If you're one of the comedy people who like comedy as well and you're in this space, I think you'll appreciate that episode. I did my own like late night John Oliver type show on what is CMMC. So you'll be able to find that on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah.
I loved getting to talk about my background a little bit more. Loved the lightning round. And I thought it was a great conversation. I appreciate you. And just, always good to catch up, whether it's on a podcast or not. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks.